Hello friends, this is Thomas and I want to thank you for tuning in today. I hope you're having a peaceful day wherever you're listening from. In this episode, we'll explore the deep currents of global conflict shaping our world right now. From the battlefields of Ukraine to the power plays of Washington and Moscow. Today, I'll break down what's really happening behind the headlines, using a clear, no-nonsense approach so you can understand the forces shaping the future. Let's start with Ukraine, a war that is no longer just about Kyiv and Moscow, but about Washington's shifting strategy, Europe's fatigue, and Russia's evolving battlefield dominance. Zelensky under fire. Allies turn cold. Western mainstream media, once Zelensky's biggest cheerleaders, are now turning against him. Outlets like Politico, Financial Times, and The Spectator have all begun publishing critical stories. Meanwhile, U.S. intelligence leaks suggest that Washington is preparing to replace Zelensky with General Valery Zaluzhny, the former commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces, a figure still connected to Russian military circles. What happens when Washington starts sharpening the knife for its own ally? This is more than just political theater. It signals a shift in U.S. priorities, from supporting Ukraine at all costs to searching for an exit strategy that doesn't look like defeat. Zaluzhny, with ties to Russia's Chief of Staff Valery Gerasimov, could be the bridge figure for backdoor negotiations. But to Ukraine's soldiers and civilians, it feels like betrayal, proof that Western promises are temporary tools, not commitments. Former President Trump, now holding the reins of U.S. foreign policy, has given Putin a 50-day window: end the war through negotiation or face escalation. But in practice, this timeline allows Russia to ramp up attacks while Ukraine waits for delayed Western aid. Is this a peace plan or a silent green light for Moscow? This ultimatum reflects Trump's style: transactional, unpredictable, and aimed at pressuring both sides. For Ukraine, it's a nightmare. Aid flows are slow, NATO is fractured over funding, and Russia is launching nearly 500 drones and missiles per day, grinding Ukraine's defenses into the ground. Instead of de-escalation, the 50-day clock has become a countdown to a bloodier battlefield. Ukrainian forces are stretched thin. Frontline brigades are understaffed, low on ammunition, and demoralized. Entire defensive lines in Donbass are crumbling. Cemeteries around Kyiv are overflowing, a silent testimony to casualties far higher than official reports. What does a war look like when a country runs out of soldiers, not just bullets? Ukraine's manpower crisis is becoming existential. Hawks in Washington and Brussels want mandatory mobilization of 18 to 25-year-olds, but even General Zaluzhny has opposed this, preferring to beg for more advanced Western weapons. Without either troops or arms, Ukraine's defensive capacity will collapse further by autumn, especially as Russia concentrates its 160,000 fresh troops for summer offensives. On July 18th, Russia deployed Tu-95 strategic bombers from a base nearly 3,800 kilometers away in eastern Siberia, a first in this war. With in-air refueling and unpredictable flight paths, they launched 9 Kh-101 cruise missiles from unexpected angles, bypassing Ukraine's radar network. Why is Moscow launching from Siberia, thousands of kilometers away? This is about stretching Ukraine's defenses beyond the breaking point. By using distant bases, Russia forces Kyiv to expand radar coverage and redeploy scarce air defense systems, which are already overworked. It's a psychological tactic too, proving that Russia can strike from anywhere at any time, while keeping its bombers safe from Ukrainian drones and long-range strikes. In a move unseen since 2008, the United States reportedly deployed B-6112 tactical nuclear bombs to Britain, flying them from Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico, to RAF Lakenheath. Is NATO quietly preparing for a nuclear-backed standoff? This deployment is a strategic signal to Moscow. NATO will not just rely on conventional deterrence. The B-61-12, with variable yields and precision guidance, can be mounted on F-35A stealth fighters, giving the alliance flexible nuclear strike capability. But it also risks escalation. Russia may interpret this as justification to withdraw from remaining arms control treaties and to forward deploy nuclear-capable systems near Europe, pushing the world closer to another Cold War brink. Zelensky, sensing the shifting winds, is suddenly calling for direct talks with Putin. Yet every negotiation round ends the same. Ukraine wants a ceasefire now. Russia demands recognition of its 4 annexed territories and NATO withdrawal guarantees. Are these peace talks real or just a stage show to buy time? For Ukraine, these talks are about keeping Western aid flowing and portraying Zelensky as a global statesman. For Russia, it's about locking in territorial gains while wearing down Kyiv's will to fight. Neither side is sincere, and everyone knows it. The war grinds on, not for weeks or months, but likely into 2026. As Washington, Moscow, and even Beijing weigh how much more blood they're willing to spend for influence. The Middle East, cracks in old alliances. The Trump-Netanyahu rift. For decades, U.S.-Israeli relations have been ironclad. But recent events, from Israel's strikes in Gaza and Syria to the bombing of a Catholic church, have triggered rare frustration inside Trump's inner circle. Some aides now describe Netanyahu as reckless and childlike, undermining U.S. diplomacy. What happens when America starts to see Israel not as a partner, but as a liability? This rift is not just about personalities. it reveals a deeper strategic divergence. The U.S. wants de-escalation in the region to focus on Russia and China, while Netanyahu's government is doubling down on aggressive operations that provoke new wars. For Washington, Israel is starting to look less like a stabilizer and more like a trigger for wider chaos, complicating Trump's grand strategy. Israel's rogue actions in Syria and Gaza. Netanyahu's recent decisions include tanking a fragile U.S.-brokered ceasefire by ordering airstrikes on Syrian convoys near Suwaida and Gaza, even as U.S. diplomats were pushing for a cooling-off period. Why would an ally sabotage its own benefactor's peace plan? Netanyahu's calculus is simple: survival and distraction. Facing domestic unrest and political challenges, he uses external aggression to rally his base and divert attention from internal instability. But this also places the U.S. in a bind. Every Israeli missile strike risks undermining Washington's credibility as a broker of peace and deepens anti-American sentiment in Arab capitals. America's strategic patience wears thin. The White House's tone has shifted. Trump personally confronted Netanyahu, demanding accountability for the church bombing in Gaza, and U.S. press briefings have adopted a sharper edge, calling Israeli actions destabilizing. Could America actually pull back support from its closest ally? While a full break is unlikely, Washington is signaling conditional support. Israel must either align with U.S. diplomatic objectives or risk losing critical backing. This is new territory. For decades, U.S. leaders tolerated, even enabled, Israeli unilateralism. Now, as global conflicts stretch American resources, patience is running out. This opens the door for regional powers like Turkey, Qatar, or even Russia to step into the mediation void, shifting the Middle East balance. Regional power realignments. As the U.S.-Israel relationship frays, other players are moving. Iran is quietly deepening ties with Russia and China. Gulf states, despite normalizing with Israel under the Abraham Accords, are hedging, reopening back channels with Tehran and Moscow. Who fills the vacuum when Washington's grip slips? This is a reshuffling of power reminiscent of the 1970s oil shock era. With the U.S. distracted by Ukraine and Asia, Middle Eastern states are asserting greater autonomy. This creates a multipolar region where Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey, and even Russia hold more sway. The danger? Without a single dominant power, proxy wars and energy shocks become more likely, threatening global markets. Israel's domestic fragility. Netanyahu's aggressive foreign policy is partly a shield against internal problems. Protests, coalition fractures, and corruption scandals. Every military operation abroad buys him time at home, but at the cost of straining alliances abroad. What happens when a nation's foreign policy is driven by one leader's survival? Such tactics are short-term fixes with long-term costs. Israel risks overextending itself, draining military resources and political goodwill. If Trump's administration decides to curb aid or leverage arms deals, Israel could find itself isolated, just as Iran and its proxies grow bolder. The U.S. faces a hard truth. It cannot micromanage the Middle East while also confronting Russia and China. The region is becoming a secondary theater, and allies like Israel must either adapt to this reality or risk being left to handle crises alone. Is Washington quietly stepping back from being the region's policeman? Yes, and this shift could reshape global security. If America reduces its footprint, we could see a power vacuum filled by China's economic influence and Russia's opportunistic military presence. The Middle East could enter a new era of competitive spheres of influence, raising the risk of clashes not just between local rivals, but between superpowers. Implications for the next decade. Every crack in the U.S.-Israel alliance ripples outward. It emboldens Iran and Hezbollah, tempts Russia to mediate conflicts for influence, and invites China to secure energy routes through economic deals and security guarantees. Could Israel survive a true regional war without full U.S. backing? Probably, but at devastating cost. Israel's defense doctrine depends on logistical, financial, and diplomatic cover from Washington. If that erodes, Israel would be forced into more desperate measures, possibly including preemptive strikes or overt nuclear signaling to deter adversaries. That, in turn, would risk pulling the U.S. back in under worse circumstances, escalating regional instability. The next flashpoint: Southeast Asia on the edge. Thailand and Cambodia. A border dispute turns hot. The border clashes between Thailand and Cambodia are not new, but the latest eruption has escalated into something far more dangerous. Skirmishes, once limited to rifle fire near the Preah Vihear temple, now involve F-16 airstrikes and heavy rocket barrages. Why is a centuries-old dispute suddenly becoming a regional powder keg? This conflict is no longer about just 153 kilometers of contested borderland. It has become a proxy for larger power plays. With Chinese military aid pouring into Cambodia, including drones, coastal missile systems, and potential JF-17 fighter transfers, and U.S.-supplied jets flying for Thailand, the border dispute is evolving into a microcosm of the U.S.-China rivalry. Cambodia's growing military confidence. Over the past decade, China has transformed Cambodia's defense posture. Billions in military aid, upgrades at the Ream naval base, and access to modern drones and missile systems have emboldened Phnom Penh. What happens when a smaller state suddenly gains the confidence of a great power at its back? China's patronage is not charity, it's strategy. By empowering Cambodia, Beijing gains a forward foothold near the Gulf of Thailand, only 30 kilometers from Vietnam's Phu Quoc Island. This not only pressures Thailand, but indirectly threatens Vietnam, a key U.S. security partner. In a wider conflict, Cambodia could act as a launch pad for Chinese naval and air assets, allowing Beijing to project power deeper into the South China Sea. Thailand's strategic bind. Thailand, a long-standing U.S. treaty ally, finds itself caught between its military's growing cooperation with China and its reliance on U.S. weaponry and trade. Recent visits by Thai generals to Beijing, coupled with joint naval exercises, signal Bangkok's attempt to hedge. Can Thailand balance between two superpowers without becoming a pawn? Thailand risks overplaying its neutrality. By drawing closer to China while still hosting joint exercises like Cobra Gold with the U.S., Bangkok may invite distrust from both sides. If the border conflict with Cambodia intensifies, Washington could pressure Thailand to pick a side, while Beijing may leverage military ties to limit Thai responses. Either scenario could erode Thailand's strategic autonomy, forcing it into decisions it has avoided for decades. The risk of escalation into a regional war. Satellite imagery and open-source intelligence already show heavy military buildups on both sides of the border. Reports of drone surveillance, minefields, and multiple battalion-level deployments indicate preparations for more than just skirmishes. Could a localized border fight spiral into a regional or even global confrontation? Yes, because the stakes go beyond Thailand and Cambodia. A prolonged conflict could draw Vietnam into the equation, given its wary stance toward a Chinese-backed Cambodia. The U.S., bound by defense ties with Thailand, could be pulled into a direct face-off with Chinese-backed forces, echoing Cold War-era proxy wars. Any escalation risks disrupting shipping lanes through the Gulf of Thailand and South China Sea, which handle trillions in annual trade. Even a temporary disruption could shock global supply chains. China's gray zone playbook. China is not deploying large armies here. Instead, it's leveraging a gray zone strategy, using paramilitary forces, naval militias, drones, and incremental infrastructure projects like the Funan Tech Canal and Darasakor Airport to shift the strategic balance without open warfare. How do you fight a war that isn't officially a war? This approach allows Beijing to expand influence with plausible deniability. By slowly building dual-use infrastructure and equipping allies like Cambodia, China avoids direct confrontation while changing facts on the ground. This makes it difficult for Washington or ASEAN to mount a unified response, as every move can be framed as economic development or defensive support. The Vietnam factor. Vietnam, while not directly involved in the current clashes, views China's footprint in Cambodia as an existential threat. Ream Naval Base sits a short distance from Vietnam's maritime routes and its southern coastline. Could Vietnam be forced into the fight to protect its flank? Vietnam's historical memory of Chinese encirclement and past clashes with both Cambodia and China could drive it to intervene, politically, economically, or militarily. Even limited Vietnamese involvement, such as supplying arms or intelligence to Thailand, could widen the conflict into a multi-nation standoff, raising the risk of naval clashes in the Gulf of Thailand and South China Sea. The domino effect in Southeast Asia. The Thailand-Cambodia conflict doesn't exist in isolation. Similar disputes simmer elsewhere. Myanmar-Thailand border issues, Laos-Cambodia frictions, Malaysia-Indonesia maritime tensions, and the ongoing South China Sea disputes involving Vietnam and China. Could one border war ignite a cascade of conflicts across the region? Absolutely. The region is a web of unresolved borders and power rivalries. If the Thailand-Cambodia conflict escalates, especially with great power involvement, it could embolden other actors to press territorial claims, destabilizing the broader ASEAN order. This could also fracture ASEAN unity, as states line up with different patrons, China, the US, or even Russia. What the next 12 months could look like. If tensions remain unchecked, we could see 1. Escalation to full air and naval engagements, with Thailand's F-16s facing off against Chinese-supplied jets in Cambodian skies. 2. Naval standoffs in the Gulf of Thailand with Chinese vessels shadowing US or Thai forces. 3. Economic disruption as shipping routes face risks from blockades or security inspections. 4. Vietnam entering the fray, potentially tipping the balance and risking wider clashes. Is Southeast Asia about to become the next major theater in the US-China rivalry? Yes, and the implications are global. The South China Sea already hosts 1/3 of the world's shipping. If this new flashpoint ignites alongside ongoing US-China tensions over Taiwan and the Philippines, it could trigger a multi-front strategic crisis, forcing Washington to divide its attention and Beijing to accelerate its regional dominance. The Thailand-Cambodia conflict is more than a border skirmish. It is a test case for the 21st century great power competition, a place where infrastructure, proxy forces, and gray zone tactics replace traditional battle lines. How Washington, Beijing, and regional powers respond will determine whether Southeast Asia becomes a stable buffer or the next global flashpoint. If you have thoughts or predictions, leave a comment below. We want to hear your perspective. And finally, thank you for listening to our deep dive military analysis. Your support helps us bring you these insights into the shifting balance of power around the world. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next episode.